Hello, this is Tim Price with the National Weather Service in El Paso, and it's Severe Weather Awareness Week in the state of New Mexico. And I'd like to welcome you to our first live broadcast talking about Severe Weather Week in New Mexico. And I've got a great panel of people to talk with us today, and we're going to be going over several issues. We're going to talk severe weather climatology. We're going to talk about what you and your family can do to be prepared for the different various kinds of severe weather that we have in New Mexico. And then we'll also have some guests from the emergency management community, and they're going to talk about their roles as far as helping you prepare for severe weather and helping their communities be resilient and bounce back during and after a severe weather event. If you would like to participate in our presentation, you can ask us any questions that you would like to. You can either use the built-in question and answer program in YouTube, and we'll be monitoring that, or you can tweet us your questions, and the hashtag that we'll be following for that is BeAForceNM. So it's hashtag BE, the letter A, force, and then NM for New Mexico. So without further ado, let me introduce everyone on the Hangout today. First up is John Fawcett. He is the warning coordination meteorologist for the El Paso office. John, how are you tonight?
Doing pretty good. It's interesting to have a few storms out there, not producing much rain, of course, but appropriate.
Very good. Next up is Kerry Jones. He is the warning coordination meteorologist at the National Weather Service office in Albuquerque. Kerry?
Hey, good evening, Tim. Thanks, everyone. And John, I had 6 drops, or maybe just shy of that.
That's 6 more drops than we got here at the weather office this afternoon. Also joining us, but at the weather forecast office in Albuquerque, is Todd Shumate. Todd?
Hey, Tim. Thanks for introducing me. Yeah, I'm working the shift here, so we're just watching these showers and storms struggling to produce those 6 drops of rainfall at the surface.
Very good. I think later on you may give us a kind of a look around your guys' operation area, because it looks kind of cool there with all the TVs in the background.
Yeah, we'll try that.
Very good. Okay, up next is Ruth Ann Kelly and Dan Herding, both of the Office of Emergency Management in Clovis, New Mexico. Guys?
Evening, everybody.
I know, Ruth Ann, you're not feeling so well. Is that true?
That is true. I'm on the mend.
Very good. Hopefully you can get through. Basically, we're planning on talking for about the next hour or so about severe weather. And I did want to say, check on Dan. How are you doing tonight, sir?
I'm doing great, and I had to put up with her all day, coughing, lung up there, making sure she was still okay all day.
Well, I certainly appreciate the effort, and I appreciate you guys' time in joining us. I really look forward to our discussion today. And again, like I said, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them into the question and answer there on YouTube, or send us use Twitter and use the hashtag BeAForceNM. So without further ado, I'm going to turn things over to Kerry here, and Kerry's going to first talk about severe weather climatology. You know, we live here in New Mexico, and most of the time it's beautiful weather. But some people don't really even think what kinds of severe weather that we do have, but we do get significant severe weather. And Kerry's going to talk about some of those things that we can see in New Mexico on occasion.
Yes, very much. Thanks, Tim. So yeah, we put together some slides to kind of highlight what we do expect on average on any given season. I thought I might first start off though. Let's define what we mean by severe weather. I think we all have maybe different definitions in terms of the general public, but in the National Weather Service we actually have pretty strict definitions. And so when the slides come up here, you'll see that in general we're going to be tracking and talking about flash floods, severe hail, tornadoes, and then also damaging wind that can accompany thunderstorms. So when we talk about flash flooding, that's pretty self-explanatory, we think, but of course, here in New Mexico, that's a really significant and dangerous hazard. because I think those that live in New Mexico understand that you don't have to be impacted by heavy rain at your location to have the impacts of a flood. And so when we track the statistics for flash flooding, we're talking about property damage, injuries, and then unfortunately those fatalities that result from flash floods. As far as the hail goes, Tim, one thing that we do keep track of is the diameter of the hailstone, and we consider a severe hailstone as 1 inch diameter, that's quarter-sized or larger. And back in 2010, I believe it was January of 2010, John, correct me if I'm wrong, but prior to January of 2010, that threshold for severe weather or severe hail was roughly the size of a penny, which was 3/4 inch diameter. And so when we look at our maps, and I believe that's what we're showing now, is you can see that by and large our focus for severe weather is across eastern New Mexico, by and large. And so if you average it out, so those maps, you're seeing the 4 maps there, that's roughly the number of events, severe events by category per county. And you may be surprised that some of our areas in the east, maybe you would think they would have more severe weather. And of course, population density plays a big role in what we're looking at in terms of reports. And so I believe we go to the next image there. I want to give a shout out to one of our forecasters that Todd and I work closely with. She's done a wonderful job at collecting these data reports and compiling them so we can create these maps, because it gives us a really good sense of what to expect on any given year. And so, again, I mentioned population density. Of course, here in New Mexico, I think as you alluded to, Tim, earlier, is that we enjoy our wide open spaces and our vistas, but of course that does impact our ability to complete the picture in terms of severe weather reports. So while there is some correlation between the number of events per county and population, fewer people mean fewer reports. Is there really very little severe weather, for example, in southern Hardin County, which is in the northeast part of the state? There's actually less than 800 total folks that live in Hardin County as of 2010. We don't think so. And so, again, the map you see there is just kind of a zoomed in a look at the far east central part of New Mexico, which is where Dan and Ruth Ann reside. And so if we look at a 30-year period, say 1980 to 2010, those are all the reports that we have. And that's a 3-decade worth of severe weather reports. And so there's obviously areas in all of those 3 counties highlighted that have had some level of severe weather. So the next slide that I put in there just kind of shows really what I think both John and all offices kind of deal with, is that really what we have observed since the mid-1990s, for example, when the Doppler radar that's currently installed there near Clovis Cannon Air Force Base, we've seen a significant increase in severe hail reports. So it's not surprising that our database has been fairly consistent since about the mid-1990s, but you'll notice that we see ebbs and flows. We see years, for example, like 2006, 2011, 2012, where we had very few reports overall, but in general, our report numbers have really trended way up since we've had the radars in place. And so that's what that graphic shows. But again, the Skywarn program that John and I manage at our local offices really contribute to these reports. And so we're in Skywarn training season now, and for those that are watching, reach out to your local office and attend a training, because you can make a huge difference in these maps and these statistics. All right, so next slide. And I believe what we're looking at now, let's just take a quick look at 2014 in terms of severe weather. So statewide, we documented 14 tornadoes, and that included actually 3 that were in mountainous terrain, which was well above the long-term average. So that table shows statewide reports, and then what we would consider roughly an average number of reports in the column on the far right. So our hail, wind, and flash flood events were generally above average across the board. And in fact, severe events that we had in 2014 were nearly what we had in 2012 and 2013 combined. So both 2012 and 2013 were relatively quiet in terms of severe weather, and we had a much more active season last year. And then I think the next slide will just show a graph. Again, Jennifer Palucki in our office has been instrumental in helping us get these stats in place. And you can see that, well, if you squint, perhaps, you can see that hail peaked during May and June. And then we had a secondary peak in September, which is not unusual in New Mexico. We often see our peak season is certainly in the springtime, April, and then especially May and June. And then we see a peak in hail during the early fall period, which is what we saw, as I said, last year. No tornadoes were reported last year during March or April, which isn't that unusual, but it is the second year in a row that we haven't seen a tornado here in the early part of spring. And then thunderstorm wind gusts, again, I don't know if I define that, but thunderstorm wind gusts are 50 knots, which is 58 miles per hour or greater. And those peaked in June, which again is pretty typical before we get into our monsoon season. And then I believe the next image, or slide, I should say, some additional facts from last year. And I'll just kind of highlight a few of those. That we had our first widespread event there just before Memorial Day, actually. And it kind of goes to my point earlier that understanding our climatology in terms of severe weather in New Mexico would kind of lead you to perhaps pay extra attention or in terms of outdoor planning around Memorial Day, because it seems like every year we have some event, either thunderstorm related or whatnot, that can really impact us during that second half of May. So we had our first widespread event last year just before Memorial Day, and in fact we had softball-sized hail near Avalon, which is down in northern Eddy County in the southeast corner of the state, again with flooding, and there was reports even around Carlsbad of some very large damaging hail. And then as we look at this June period, that June 6th through 8th event was quite memorable. I know Todd, myself, and others, it was a really busy stretch for our office. We had 104 severe weather reports in just a 3-day period, and that accounted for about a quarter of our total reports for the season. So it was a big 3-day period. And that's one thing I'd like to highlight is that, unlike other areas of the country, here in New Mexico, we can have 2 or 3 days in a row of severe weather. And so other places, they may have like a 1 12-hour or less period, but oftentimes we deal with it for multiple days. And then, of course, September, and John knows this quite well, with the heavy rain, the remnants of what once was Hurricane Odile last year that came up and just dropped copious amounts of rainfall. And of course, our flash flooding events really ramped up during September of last year. So we'll go forward here, just a couple more slides for my part, and we'll talk about tornadoes. And I'll just kind of highlight this graph specifically. Just over half the tornadoes that we typically see in New Mexico, they do occur during the month of May and June. And the greatest number that we've documented in the state of New Mexico is back in 1991, and curiously, my grandmother, late grandmother who lived in Carlsbad, was almost impacted by one of those tornadoes in 1991, but that was a big event, and we haven't seen anything like that since. And again, May and June, the big months for tornadoes. Next page. So I just wanted to mention that we have compiled all these statistics for severe weather. They are on our webpage, and I believe the link is kind of highlighted on the slide there. So we have much more available, including county-based statistics on not only tornadoes, but severe hail, damaging wind gusts, as well as flash floods. And so in terms of planning, community preparedness, of course, which is Ruth Ann and Dan's role, this is a great way to kind of plug that information into newsletters and that type of information. So I believe that's all I have for the climatology side of the presentation. Well, of course, I have Q&A at the end if there's anything that you would like to learn more about.
Very good. Hey, Carrie, I'm going to put you on the spot here, and maybe John can chime in, or Todd. Is there any county that's never seen a tornado in New Mexico, or have we gotten a tornado report from every county in New Mexico?
No, in fact, Catron County, Tim, comes to mind without a documented tornado. And I guess it's hard to believe, going back to 1950, that we have not had, but otherwise, if you go back to, well, we don't need to do that, I guess. But so that comes to mind. But otherwise, yes, I think we have had documented tornadoes in every county.
And not to minimize Catron County, but I know that we've had documented tornadoes in and around like Silver City.
Right.
So, and that's not that far away from Catron County. So more than likely they've had tornadoes in Catron County. We just haven't had the people there to see them and take pictures of them.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And as I kind of was not picking on Hardin County, that's one of my favorite places in the state, but that's our least populous county in New Mexico. And as I said, that you look at Hardin County and you see our tornado reports more in the northern part of that county, not so much in the southern part, when in fact I'm sure we've had not just maybe one or two, but maybe quite a few more that just have gone unreported.
Right, exactly. Well, Kerry, I appreciate that. That was fascinating to see all the different kinds of severe weather and how they occur around the states, and then kind of gave a quick review of what happened last year. I know me as a forecaster, I worked several of those, especially those flood events back in September, and it's just very significant, and it was very sobering. I know here in El Paso we actually had one fatality from a flood that occurred in the northeast part of El Paso. So certainly something that everyone needs to take serious and be aware of. You provided a lot of information, and now I'm going to have John. He's going to speak to where you can get some of that information on our various websites and different things, avenues of social media. So I'm going to turn things over to John Fawcett, who is in the El Paso office with me right now. John?
Okay, one thing I'd like to add, a lot of people associate these huge severe weather events with out in the plains. For example, the New Mexico plains. But back in 2005, I think it was, October 2005, maybe 2004, $40 million hailstorm, mainly baseball-sized hail, up in Kerry's area there in Socorro, New Mexico. That would stack up with almost anywhere in the country, so that's pretty amazing. Okay, proceeding on to the next slide, and I don't know how much of a delay there will be, but I know that a lot of people get confused sometimes when they hear the two WA words, watch or warning. But the kind of severe information that you should be looking for, first of all, we issue, or at least the Storm Prediction Center will issue tornado watches or severe thunderstorm watches, and the field offices like Albuquerque, Midland, or El Paso will issue flash flood watches. In either case, covers several counties, usually over several hours of time, indicating that during that time over that area, severe weather is favorable. The conditions are favorable. Doesn't mean it's happening yet. Could still be blue skies and sunshine outside, but the conditions indicate that within hours something could explode. Now, when you get down to the warning level, that means we've either seen it indicated on radar and about to happen, or it is already taking place. The target for us is to give you lead time, so we like to spot it ahead of time. So tornado warning means a tornado is likely to develop or already spotted. Seek shelter. We'll talk a little more about that later. Severe thunderstorm warning. As Kerry mentioned, a thunderstorm qualifies as severe if it produces hail the size of a quarter or larger, and or damaging wind speeds, wind gusts at least 58 miles per hour. And again, much like the tornado warning, you would want to seek shelter. Now, the flash flood warning means the life-threatening or damaging flooding is either occurring or is going to be happening within the next 45 minutes or so. Move to higher ground. It's not so much seek shelter in that case. You want to be getting above the flooding waters. Okay, and also the warnings are over a much smaller area. It used to be locked into counties, but now we have polygons that can cover a portion of one county, maybe into another, and over a smaller period of time. So people can really take action once a warning is issued. Okay, next slide. And as we move forward, then we'll be talking about another way of looking at how we get this information out to you folks in the pyramid form, you might say. Now, days in advance, down there at the bottom, hazardous weather outlook, and those are available on our web pages. You can get to our web pages with weather.gov and / the name of the office following it. You know, an easy way for me to tell folks about finding our offices on the web. Just go to weather.gov and you enter that, and a map comes up, and just click on the area you're interested in, and the office responsible, their website comes up, and there you go. Well, you can get the hazardous weather outlook days in advance, up to 7 days in advance. That's where we try to tell you about any kind of weather scenario that could produce severe weather as far as we can see in the future. Of course, there's a lot of uncertainty with that because it still could be days in advance. But once we get to the day of the event, we most likely will be issuing a watch hours in advance to possibly a half a day or so in advance. So, and we already discussed the watch covers a several county area for several hours. Now, you're getting closer to the event. Depending on the severity of what we think is going to happen, there could be a special weather statement, or some call it a significant weather advisory, which is a special weather statement for strong thunderstorms that are not quite severe, but still they could really be an issue. And then, of course, the warning for the events we talked about, or for the phenomena like severe thunderstorm, tornado, or flash flood. Take action. It's going to be within the next few minutes, over a time span of half hour to an hour, maybe even 2 or 3 hours in the when we're talking about flash flooding. But you need to take your action at that time. Okay, and proceeding to the next slide. The NOAA Weather Radio, by now I hope you've heard of that. You can purchase those at many electronic stores. That's still the only way to get transmit warnings from the National Weather Service. We transmit the warning, a signal goes out, picked up by the your transmitter that you purchased, your receiver, excuse me, not transmitter, picked up by the receiver, and if you've got it set right, it'll set off an obnoxious alarm that's supposed to get your attention. A warning has been issued for your area. Unfortunately, the signal does not cover the entire state. Look there are many areas with no color, just white and maybe some gray shadowing that does not receive the NOAA Weather Radio signal. So if you're fortunate enough to live in an area that has it, that's a great way to go. Other ways, media, of course, your favorite radio or television station, especially television, they will usually, especially because of their competitive nature, they'll try to get that warning out to you as soon as possible. Then again, you're probably not going to be watching TV all night long, and sometimes these things happen overnight when you're asleep. Mobile, like on your phone, you can go to mobile.weather.gov. That's one way of getting information, including warnings. And another is using the widget. You can see the website there to get an experimental widget. And amateur radio operators, they're a great way to try to keep us informed of what's happening out there. But you know what has really been, as we go to the next slide, you know what has been really growing in popularity and probably getting warnings out in more ways than any other method is through your cell phone. Oh, yeah, I guess you shouldn't be surprised, but the wireless emergency alerts, those actually, I think by default, most of the major carriers with your newer cell phones, you're going to get these warnings, okay? And you can see that picture in the middle there. It doesn't have the entire text of the warning. It just tells you there's an emergency alert, you've got a tornado warning or whatever it is in effect, and it lasts until this time. And if you're traveling, this is really nice to have. Once you cross into an area that has a warning in effect, you'll get that message on your phone. Now, it's not perfect. You're going to be pretty much controlled by the cell phone tower for that area, so there could be a possibility of you getting a false alarm in a county that you're not in, but that's usually not the case. Now, you're not going to get severe thunderstorm warnings, okay? Unfortunately, you will get tornado warnings this way, flash flood warnings, dust storm warnings, and then in the case of a line of thunderstorms producing, let's say 80 to 90 mile per hour winds over a large area, there's that rare extreme wind warning, which may be something that could happen in the eastern plains of New Mexico. Of course, I'm not going to mention, or we're not going to be concerned about hurricane, typhoon, or tsunami warnings around here, and yet if you're traveling, you very well might be. So this is a good way. Now, if for some reason you don't want this, you can opt out of it, but I don't recommend that. Again, this is going to be improving over time, just like everything else has been with cell phones. Okay, next slide. Oh, and Carrie, feel free to interrupt if I've forgotten something, okay? Now, social media. Like it or not, it is growing and expanding, and we are finding at the National Weather Service it's not a bad thing. Yes, there can be false alarms if you're looking on Twitter, somebody's putting some inaccurate report out, but we've found ways to really find out which reports are good and which aren't. And for you folks on the other end, if you monitor our Twitter accounts you can see them before there. Our handle here in El Paso is at NWS El Paso, and you can see the other two offices that cover New Mexico. Twitter is probably right now one of the best ways to keep up on the latest weather happenings in addition to our warnings. Facebook, it's not as quick, but if you look at our Facebook pages, you can get information on watches and warnings and many other things that are not limited to 144 characters and easier to post nice pictures. And then YouTube is something that, a lot of you are probably watching us on YouTube right now. So I don't have to sell YouTube in that respect, but we have our own YouTube channels. And we will put out also on our YouTube channels, we'll put out web briefings on big events coming up, and we'll get into them very deeply, like an extended TV weathercast. So social media, that is definitely a way to go. Now, if I'm correct, the next slide introduces the next section, and unfortunately, the warning coordination meteorologist from the Midland office could not join us because of technical difficulties, but he is a key player in this whole New Mexico Severe Weather Awareness Week. Carrie, wouldn't you agree, Carrie? Mark Strobin has really been somebody to help us in these last couple of years that he's been with us.
Hey, Carrie, yes. You're muted.
Oh, I see. I'm sorry. I shouldn't do that.
No, you caught me. I was listening and I was talking the whole time. Yeah, Mark has been great, really, John, in many aspects. I mean, certainly, they deal in Midland. I guess we should have talked earlier that the Midland office covers Eddy and Lee counties. Yep. So they have the two counties in the southeast corner, but certainly one of the more severe weather-prone parts of the state. And so, absolutely, he's been, in terms of the information sharing, which is really what it's all about. And that's what Awareness Weeks are designed to do, is to bring people together and really elevate the need to understand, know your risks and so forth before you get into an event.
And you mentioned, I can't remember if it was your late grandmother or something, Carrie, almost in that tornado in Carlsbad a ways back. Well, Carlsbad is now under the Midland office responsibility area. And also last September, I think it was in the New Mexico boundaries in Eddy County, when the remnants of Hurricane Odile sat over that area. It was just some ungodly number of 15 to 20 inches of rain. It was just very hard to believe. Yes, the rest of us got our share of heavy rain and damaging flooding, but Mark was working very, very hard during that period of time. So,
and that's right, as you and Tim were as well. And it's interesting, John, we often talk about our storms that will move, say, out of Sierra or out of Socorro County and into Sierra County, and then vice versa. Sometimes we send storms, towards you, and then you send them back towards us. But in all cases, it seems like most of our bad weather, John, ends up in Mark's area.
That's right. I think you and I tend to send him more than he can send our way, unfortunately. But yes, pretty nasty over in that area. Okay, so Tim, should we proceed on to the rest of the presentation here?
Yeah, I think Mark was going to cover severe weather safety. So I'll let you and Carrie kind of talk about that, and you guys can work through the slides.
Okay.
And I will throw it up on the screen here.
Okay, and you'll have both of our mics activated, right?
Yes. So go right on ahead. It's up.
Okay. Okay. Tornado safety. There have been a lot of things said over the decades about tornado safety that over time we have found to be incorrect. Believe it or not, I think the National Weather Service, probably as the U.S. Weather Bureau long ago, at one time was telling folks to, if a tornado approaches, open your windows, thinking it was going to allow the pressure dropping outside to be equalized in the house, and the house wouldn't explode. And the engineers came along and said, no. If you open your windows, you're going to make it worse. You're inviting the tornadoes, damaging debris inside, and besides, the tornado is going to open the windows for you with shattering the windows. So you use that time to seek shelter in an underground shelter, which is the best, or as of the last few years, these tornado safe rooms, which were far more common over in Oklahoma, North Texas, and areas that get a lot more tornadoes. But those two would be the safest, and yet you can still protect yourself, especially in the on a scale of 0 to 5, the 0s, 1s, and 2s, those strengths of tornadoes, which are by far more common. If you in your house, if you have a relatively sturdy shelter on the lowest floor, in the interior room, the smallest room, the most walls you can put between you and the outside threat of the tornado, the better. You know what that's going to be? It's probably going to be a bathroom or a closet. And if you can cover yourself with a mattress, that's even better. You want to be away from windows, in a smaller room, and towards the center of the house. So be thinking about that. Look at your own dwelling. See where you would go if a tornado warning was issued for your location. Okay? There are a couple of places you don't want to be. And in a mobile home, even when they're anchored, they are just not good protection when tornadic winds start affecting the mobile home. And the other place is an automobile. No. There was a video that was very popular in 1991, and it's gotten into people's heads, and it can't seem to get out of their heads. The video showed a family escaping a tornado by crawling up under an overpass, into a crawl space, and most underpasses don't have those. And the tornado, it wasn't pointed out, it started to come down the road, but it went behind them. It didn't come straight down the road through the overpass. And they barely escaped, and so people started abandoning their homes to find an overpass. Let's do that. And park their car along the road, stopping traffic so people well ahead of the storm could not escape, and people started dying by taking those actions. So no, do not seek an overpass, all right?
And John, let me just jump in there real quick. Sorry to interrupt, but I know we're talking about that June 6th through 8th severe weather outbreak that we had last year, and in fact there's a fairly viral video from an overpass near Springer, New Mexico on Interstate 25. We had tornado warnings in effect for that general area, but more importantly, there was moderately large hail, and so people were trying to tuck themselves under the underpass and ran into, I mean, the issues that you just raised, but also, of course, it blocks the flow of traffic, and in fact, both north and southbound I-25 at that overpass was effectively at a standstill. And so, and that was it's a video that unfortunately we're now using in our spotter training, but it's not something that we want to see in New Mexico.
That's unfortunate, yes. And imagine first responders trying to get to an area that's had damage and injuries. If you're blocking the road with people parking to get under the overpass, they can't get to where they need to go. And in the event of you're out in the rural area, you see a tornado coming, if there's plenty of distance and it's clear where you could escape to and you're not getting into an area with low visibility or driving into another storm, okay, yes, you can drive away from the tornado. But once it gets closer, you're going to be fighting inflow that's feeding the storm. You may not be able to drive as fast as you think. Tornadoes do not have to follow curves in the road. It's probably better when the tornado is too close to find a ditch, keeping your mind on the fact that there could be flash flooding later in that ditch. Okay, if you're out of doors, you're kind of out of luck, but at least you can make it a little less dangerous for yourself by finding a ditch or something like that. So it's unfortunately something that's got a lot of things to think about. Hail is another issue. Large hail, I don't have to convince you about large hail, right? If you get something the size of a baseball coming down at about 100 miles per hour, that's going to feel like a major league pitcher throwing a fastball right at your head. You don't want that. Okay, so yes, it could injure you. It could possibly even kill you if you don't seek shelter from large hail. But how about small hail? A whole lot of small hail can cause lots of problems. It can be even slicker than snow. I mean, Carrie, how many accidents have there been from a lot of small hail?
Oh, I mean, I was just going to mention that I would argue that even several inches, 3, 4, 5 inches of small hail is more hazardous than would a severe thunderstorm producing a few, say quarter-size hailstones. Certainly, it's a huge issue, and I know we've had issues here just within the last year on interstate travel where they've had to bring out the snowplows to clear swaths that have been covered by several inches of snow. We have one event, I think it's on, or was on the previous slide, in the Jemez Mountains in October, John. You know, there's that secondary peak we talk about in the fall, and they had not just a few inches of hail accumulation, but the DOT snowplow operators remarked that they have photos of 12 to 14 inch deep accumulations in that stretch. So yeah, that's just a nasty situation. So
yeah, unfortunately, hail. Most people don't think of it as life-threatening because they usually do get inside. But you know, with hail, you also want to be away from windows. If you've got an 80-mile-per-hour severe thunderstorm gust pushing a baseball-sized hailstone into your window, what's going to happen to you? No, you don't want to be there. Okay, what's the next slide? Lightning. Oh wow, lightning safety. When thunder roars, go indoors. That you can't say it any better than that. In fact, if you're in a rural, I mean, in an urban setting, and thunder is competing with traffic noise and stuff like that, if you can clearly hear thunder, it doesn't even have to be roaring. You need to get inside. There's no safe place outdoors. You can, maybe try to make it slightly less dangerous outdoors, but the bottom line is you need to get indoors, and we're not talking under a gazebo. We're talking about an enclosed building, away from the windows, away from things that are plugged in, where outside lightning current can enter your home and affect you that way. Computers that are plugged in, the conventional landline phones that are plugged in, no, don't be around those. And if you're outdoors, oh my, well, just avoid being the tallest object. Don't be around any isolated tall objects. There are many things to talk about outdoors, but now it's also good to find an enclosed automobile, not a convertible. Believe it or not, the thing you don't want to be touching, the metal, is probably what's going to help save your life. If lightning happens to hit on or near the vehicle, it's going to keep it around you but not on you, the current. And then, of course, no, you can move on to the next slide. But lightning in New Mexico is the #1 thunderstorm-related killer. And microbursts, whether they're dry or wet, damaging wind is something, I say treat it like a tornado. It's just not twisting. If you get an 80 to 100 mile per hour wind gust out of a thunderstorm, it's going to do damage, and you don't want to be on the receiving end of that damage. Now, the dry microburst is tricky, okay, and you see more of that in the springtime than you do in the summer. That's when you've got a big layer of dry air below a thunderstorm, and it gives that rain a lot of chance to evaporate. And what that does is it cools the air, makes it more dense and heavier, and it accelerates the air that was already coming down out of that thunderstorm. And it can get to damaging proportions and cause blowing dust, and that's.
Hey, John. Real quickly.
Oh, go ahead, Tim. I'm sorry.
Real quickly, John, can you define for the viewers what a microburst is?
A microburst, very good, Tim. Sometimes we meteorologists, we weather geeks, forget about that type of thing. A microburst is like a water balloon of air descending out of a thunderstorm. You may have heard of updrafts that build a storm and downdrafts that descend when the rain and hail start to fall and drag the air down. Well, evaporation can intensify that downward motion. We call those downdrafts. Well, when a downdraft kind of goes bad and gets to a damaging proportion, we call it a downburst. It's like a water balloon of air that descending, making impact with the ground, and then spreading out like you see in the diagram before you. And a microburst is a smaller downburst. And almost all of the downbursts that we see in Mexico are going to be microbursts. It doesn't matter if it's micro, smaller, or macro, bigger. You need to seek shelter from this type of thing, and watch out for those dense dust storms that can result in the drier part of the thunderstorm season. We get a lot of automobile accidents out of those and fatalities.
And Tim, if I could just add to what John said, tied it into lightning. Gosh, here in New Mexico and folks that visit from out of state, if you're not getting wet, the perception is the threat is not that big of a deal. And that's really, that's really when lightning, those first strikes can really be problematic, if not deadly in some cases. It's always that first strike, and certainly if the rain isn't making it to the ground, even more of a concern. So.
Right. Well, we talk about dry lightning as a wildfire threat. Well, it could be a threat to anybody, right, Carrie?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Lightning without rain, hey, it's still going to kill you.
I think this is our last slide, John. I just wanted to mention that on our websites, and as John said, just go to weather.gov. That's all you need to remember, and then click on New Mexico, and it'll bring you to your local office. And then we have, at least this week, headlined our link to Severe Weather Awareness Week. And then we have tabs on that page that really go into more detail on not just weather safety, but also thunderstorms, tornadoes, lightning, everything that we've talked about this evening. You can get much more detail. And so we encourage you to check that out in terms of an information source. And then I believe our contact information, both myself, John, and Mark, are listed there as well. So reach out to us and let us help you, because that's what we're here for.
You know, it's very possible that Mark is watching us on YouTube. Hi, Mark.
I sure hope so.
Very good. Well, let's turn to Ruth Ann and Dan right now. You guys are kind of on the other side of things. You are directly interacting with the Weather Service on the one hand, but you're also working with community leaders and the citizens of Clovis there. Can you kind of tell us exactly what your role there in the Emergency Management Office there in Clovis is?
We have several roles, actually, but when it comes to weather, what we're trying to really do is get our community involved and try to enlighten them on the weather facts. Carrie comes out here all the time. We just did 2 of the Skywarn classes, which we had some good success with. We had 40 people in attendance over 2 days. We also have a tornado awareness class coming up that's being presented by the National Disaster Preparedness folks through FEMA. So we're looking forward to that one. It's a pilot program that's we're hosting here in Clovis next Monday on April 6th, and that's an all-day class. And really, we try to keep the community and get the community involved as much as we can on these things.
A lot of education, making sure that they know what they should know when an event happens, what they should put in a disaster supply kit, what the sirens sound like, all of that kind of stuff.
Well, very good. Let's talk about community preparedness. What is your guys' role in getting your community ready to, I guess, better prepare for, deal with, and then recover from severe weather?
Well, our role is to obviously get our community involved and try to have them as prepared as possible. We do that several ways. Just this last weekend, we had a home and garden show here in town, and through our local emergency planning committee, we had a booth set up, and we try to enlighten everybody. We hand out materials. We have a spin game, kind of like a Wheel of Fortune, where it lands on a number, and we ask them a trivia question, and if they answer the trivia question, well, even if they don't, they still get a prize. But it gets our community thinking, what do we need in a kit? Do we need a kit? Do we drink the water after there's been an incident? You know, all these things. We just try to get our folks involved and try to get them to think about being prepared. And we also have all the resources available. If anybody needs information, we give it to them. And it's just community awareness is one of our big things that we try to do.
I guess another question I have, and you kind of touched on it, is being in New Mexico. It's been my experience that many times people don't take severe weather as serious as, let's say, they do east of the mountains or in the plains. Have you found that is made your jobs a little more difficult? And like you said, getting people just to think about what to do in the case of severe weather and to be prepared to take action if any severe weather were to come their way.
I would say overall our community is pretty well in tune to the weather. Our folks are very much focused on severe weather in the form of tornadoes. We had that tragic tornado in March of 2007. And that's still very fresh. It's almost like still an open wound in our community here, and it's still very much there. So people are very focused on our tornadoes. We try to explain that there's more than tornadoes out there. We have, like I said, the hail. We have the thunderstorms. We have the lightning. We have the flash flooding. Last July we had 5 inches of rain in a few hours that did some good water to our playas here. So I think our folks are very much in tune. And sometimes we just need that little tweak and kind of remind them what to do during those situations. Not go run outside and take pictures of the impending storm.
Hey, Ruth Ann, what are some of the educational resources people could draw on to kind of better prepare for being ready for severe weather?
We do, Curry County LEPC has a Facebook page. I put a lot of information out on there. We have a traditional website as well to put information on. We do brochures, flyers, the different classes that we've brought in over time. Just trying to expand out to that younger generation is probably my only gap. I don't always get the newer technology.
Do you guys use any kind of social media yet?
Just Facebook.
Just Facebook right now?
Just Facebook.
Very good. John, Kerry, do you guys have any question for Ruth Ann or for Dan?
I have a question with the Clovis area there. Okay, how much coordination do you have, like with your surrounding counties? Because severe weather tends to, I watch those systems. They just seem to cross several counties. And do you coordinate with your neighboring EMs?
Oh, by all means, we sure do. We have a really good, I say, network out here with all our EMs. We all have each other's phone numbers on speed dial. If something's in Roosevelt County, most likely it's going to track our way. And sometimes it comes from the north and tracks towards Roosevelt County or out to Debaca sometimes. So we're all talking with each other. And we had some severe weather last year in June, and I get a call from the emergency manager in Santa Fe saying, "Hey, you guys okay?" I said, "Yeah, we're doing good. Thanks for the call." So, I mean, we're a very tight-knit community out here as far as the emergency managers. We all know each other. We all have each other on speed dial, so it works fantastic.
Awesome.
Again, like I said real briefly at the beginning, if you guys have any questions, and I know that there are people watching on YouTube, if you guys have any questions, you can tweet us a question. You can see the hashtag. I put it there in my my lower third. It's #BeAForceNM. So if you have a question, you can use Twitter and tweet at us, or there's a built-in way to ask questions on YouTube, and you can just join. I believe it says join the conversation, and you can ask a question that way. All right, John, Kerry, do you guys have anything else to say before we look to see if we've got any questions?
Well, when I asked about, the EMs coordinating, and the National Weather Service coordination is a very high priority, and we need to coordinate with the Albuquerque National Weather Service Office as well as the Midland National Weather Service Office, and we have to be careful. Sometimes we can get tunnel vision, but in the off season, or like when the weather is not so active, is when we do a lot of our ramping up and coordinating with each other. And this right now is just one of those examples, but I am very fortunate to be able to work with Kerry and Mark. So I know, Dan and Ruth Ann, I know how you feel with your network up there. It's really important.
Hey, Dan, could you talk real quick? Sorry to jump in there. I was muted again. The TV market there in Clovis, the folks receive actually their warnings. Many may not know this, but they receive that from Amarillo. Right. And as it turns out, Amarillo, Clovis is their second largest population center in their, is it DMA, is that right, John, or their viewing area?
Their viewing area, right.
And so talk a little bit, Dan, about maybe challenges that we deal with, not just it's a time zone difference. There's a lot of unique issues that you deal with.
Right. Like you said, Amarillo is our primary TV market here. And like I said, the time zone, they're an hour ahead of us. So instead of getting your news at 6 o'clock, we get our news at 5 p.m. And that kind of makes it interesting. So all our weather warnings come from Albuquerque, which we have a good relationship with that office, but the TV comes from Amarillo, so that makes a challenge there. And our radio stations, A lot of them in the evening go automated. There's no one there, and it can take up to 30 minutes to get a live body there. Now I've worked with the radio stations here, and I've got phone numbers to call the owners and so forth, the reporters at home. Says, hey, can you get in? We have this going on, and they've been very good, very receptive, and work very well with us in that manner. So we have some challenges, yes, but we're so far able to overcome them pretty well.
Good. Yep.
Well, very good. I haven't seen any questions come on Twitter, but I've got a question for any of you guys. And I know that when I go to schools, I always get the question, or I always throw out, do we get tornadoes here? And the answer I always get back is no, and then I ask why. They always say because of the mountains. So right here, right now, in front of everybody, do mountains protect us from tornadoes? Who would like to answer that?
Well, John's laughing. The short answer is no. In fact,
I was just going to say, when I first came...
Oh, John froze up. Go ahead, Carrie.
Oh, I was just going to say, yeah. As John froze up there. So we had 3 last year. In fact, Todd, there was a storm that went near Corona, which is in the northern part of Lincoln County, south central New Mexico. And there was a tornado, not a lot of damage from the tornado, but certainly mountains are right in the vicinity. So no, that's a big myth. And it seems like we are always happy to dispel that. Fortunately, the tornadoes that we've had near mountains have not done a tremendous amount of damage, but certainly they have that potential. Go ahead, John.
Am I still frozen?
No.
You're good.
Well, I like to point out to people, I know it's not New Mexico, but there was a violent, large tornado that crossed the Continental Divide in Wyoming back in the 1980s, and or there's a strong tornado in Salt Lake City, which is surrounded by mountains, not too long ago. Every now and then you'll see a tornado on a snow patch, and it turns white up in the mountains. So yes, the mountains make it more difficult to bring all the conditions together. They do not prevent tornadoes, so you can't rest with that deadly notion that we don't get tornadoes here because of the mountains.
Right.
Hey, John, correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the stronger tornadoes we've seen in southern New Mexico was actually just outside of Silver City, New Mexico, back in the 1950s.
That's correct. I don't know if folks are familiar with the intensity scale of tornadoes, so I just say 0 to 5. There is a 3 on the 0 to 5 intensity rating, which is very strong. The only one that strong we've ever had in our 8-county area. And yes, that was the Grant County Airport, which is just south of Silver City. That's pretty sobering. Very
good. Hey, Todd, I was wondering, are you ready to kind of show us around the operations area, what you're working on right there?
Sure, I'd be happy to.
Okay.
Yeah, like I said before, I guess Tim and I are both working on shift right now. And so here at the National Weather Service in Albuquerque right now, you can kind of probably see my background, but that's our situational awareness screen. And basically what we're monitoring up there is we have an in-house software program that is running through all webcams throughout our forecast area, which covers northern and central New Mexico. And basically that just kind of helps us keep an additional set of eyes on what's going on around the state. You can see real quickly just via webcams what the peaks at Red River look like. Is it snowing there? What's it doing up there at Farmington? Is there any of those showers? Are they sprinkling? Is it actually making it to the ground, or is it just producing gusty winds? Well, things like that. So that's a pretty handy little display that we have back there. We have the ability to look at a lot of different news feeds as well. We're constantly looking at the broadcast media and seeing what is coming across on the TV news feeds. Is there any kind of flooding that's going on? A lot of times that reports from the media, TV media, that can actually help verify some of our warnings and give us a little bit more awareness of how our warnings are faring during times of inclement or severe weather. So that's pretty handy. And I'm kind of tethered here to the cord, but I'll try and kind of walk you around here and show you the operations area. So as I stand up here, this is our operations area. We actually have at least 2, sometimes as many as 4 people manning the operations area on any given day. We're open 24 hours a day and 365 days a year. And so we'll generally have at least one person that is doing what we call data acquisition or public service. That can include doing an upper air balloon release, releasing a weather balloon twice a day. We had a gentleman here that's ending his shift right now. He released the weather balloon at 5 p.m. And then we'll also have generally a general forecaster and then a senior forecaster working the shift as well. And so we'll divvy up the forecast duties. We do 7-day forecasts throughout, in our case, Albuquerque, we do northern and central New Mexico. El Paso, they do south central to southwestern New Mexico. And then, of course, Midland covers Eddy and Lake counties in southeastern New Mexico. So on any given shift, we're watching weather conditions, be it short term, the next 30 minutes, all the way out to 7 days. So we'll do anything from aviation forecasts for pilots, fire weather forecasts for firefighters and fire management officials, and then just general public forecasts. Is it going to rain tomorrow? What's the sky going to look like? Are we going to have clouds? Things like that. So that's just a brief little view of what's going on here at the Albuquerque Operations Center.
Hey, great, thanks, Todd. Now, I know things look there pretty calm right now because there's not a whole lot of weather going on. How are things like in the operations area during active weather? Is it just crazy, or are you guys just kind of all hunkered down in front of radar screens and things like that?
Well, we like to call it controlled chaos. It does get pretty active. A lot of times the phones are ringing off the hook, and we usually keep our person who is in charge of issuing all the warnings, our radar forecaster. We try and let them have complete attention to the radar and just kind of get in that zone and stay focused on the weather. That's their primary goal, and their primary objective is to keep people safe, by the issuance of watches and warnings. So. In addition to that, we're always calling people, our Skywarn spotters, looking for reports. Hey, this storm that's moving over, did you get any hail with it? We had a severe thunderstorm warning for hailstones up to 1/4 of an inch. Did it produce that at your place? And we're doing things like that. We're also updating our warnings constantly, and then we're also just perusing social media, looking for reports that way. There's a lot that goes into a severe weather type event, so it can get a little bit hectic at times, but it is controlled chaos for the most part.
Very good. Well, we did get a question that came in on Twitter, and the question was directed at Ruth Ann and Dan, basically asking, on the EM side of things, what's being done to reach a wider community, and in this case, in particular in New Mexico, the Spanish-speaking community. You guys have any insights there?
Well, we have a public warning system called Nixle. If you sign up to it, whenever the Weather Service in Albuquerque issues a watch or warning, it automatically sends that warning out to our Facebook, but it also sends it out to your cell phone and or email, depending on what you opt in out. The neat thing about it is there's a Spanish language option that the individual who signs up for can opt in and have it sent to them in Spanish. Now, other than that, the language is a challenge for us. It's one we have to overcome. We're slowly working on it. We have to get those folks that can interpret that material for us so we can get it in Spanish, maybe other languages that are out there, so we reach that broader audience. Now, the state does have a preparedness book that we do have that's in both English and Spanish. So it's an ongoing challenge, but we're constantly striving to overcome.
Very good. I know that here in southern New Mexico, we actually have a weather radio that is broadcasting in Spanish 24 hours a day. So most of the time it's just playing a forecast and the current conditions, but during times of active weather, the warnings will be inserted and they are in Spanish. So if you know of anybody who's a Spanish language person who speaks Spanish, or maybe Spanish is the primary language in the household, and you're in and around the El Paso area, it does have a limited reach. You can get a weather radio and tune into that and get weather warnings for El Paso and Doña Ana County in Spanish. Is that correct, John?
Yes, and I also like to add that we have 3 of our staff are fluent in Spanish, including our supervisor, Jesus Haro, and they've made great strides in trying to educate the Spanish-speaking community, because, of course, with our office being nearer to the international border, we have a high percentage of Spanish-first language folks, and they have to be looked after just like anyone else. And I'm really proud of the efforts that have taken place from this office.
Well, very good. We're a little past 8 o'clock, so I guess we've been going for a little over an hour now, so I promised everyone we'd run for about an hour, and I really appreciate everyone who's stayed with us this whole time. But just as we wrap up, I'll ask John and Carrie and Ruth Ann and Dan, do you guys have any last-minute comments before we wrap things up today?
I'll close my part with the 2 rhymes that are so helpful. When thunder roars, go indoors, and turn around, don't drown. Very effective. And please stay safe this severe weather season. Our New Mexicans really need to take care of themselves.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. This has been very, very helpful for not only getting the message out, but of course our awareness week runs through Saturday, but awareness doesn't stop after this week ends. So make it a point, reach out to your neighbors, your community leaders, and others, and really help us, be our ambassadors to get the word out. And I think that's really the underlying message for all of us. And together we can make a difference. And I think when you look at the statistics, certainly with lightning, for example, we have made a difference. I'm convinced of it. And it's through efforts like this that just continue to make it even better. So thanks for setting us up.
Very good. Ruth Ann, Dan, did you have anything to say as we wrap things up?
I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to come on here and talk with you guys. It's great to be partners with everybody involved to make sure our communities remain safe and are safe. So it's a great opportunity to get that word and continue getting the word out there for all those folks. So thank you very much.
Definitely. Thank you.
Very good. Well, it was our pleasure. I'm glad we could all come together. Again, I want to thank John Fawcett, the Warning Coordination Meteorologist at the El Paso area office, Carrie Jones, the Warning Coordination Meteorologist at the Albuquerque office, and Todd Shoemake, a forecaster at the Albuquerque office. He gave us that cool tour of their operations area. I also want to thank Ruth Ann and Dan, who are working over in the Clovis Emergency Management Office, for joining us today. So be sure to continue, like John and Carrie said, it's going to be a Severe Weather Awareness Week all week long. You can check out any of our web pages that has a link at the top of the page that you can go to and get more information. And to find our web pages, probably the best thing to do would be to go to weather.gov and then click on someplace in New Mexico. If it's in the southeast corner, if you live in the southeast corner, you'll be taken to the Midland office. If you live in the south central or southwest corner of New Mexico, you'll be taken to the El Paso area office. And just about everywhere else in New Mexico, if you click on it, you'll be taken to the Albuquerque office. We all have links to our Severe Weather Awareness Week web pages at the top of our main home pages. Of course, you can always get the latest information on any severe weather that does happen from our web pages, from social media outlets that we now have. So again, I want to thank everybody for joining us. I want to thank the panel for joining us today. We had a great time. I thank you for everyone who watched us on YouTube and those who asked us questions on Twitter. So I think this was a big success. I really enjoyed putting it together and helping us come together for this conversation, because I think, like I alluded to earlier, in New Mexico we are blessed with beautiful weather most of the time, and that can give many people a false sense of that severe weather doesn't happen, but it does happen, and it can happen in a flash. We saw that last summer with flooding rains, and we've seen it several times with tornadoes, especially in the East Plains, with lightning and with hail. Those are all threats that we need to just be aware of and be prepared for during this, as we get into the summer months, as we get into the severe weather season. So again, for everyone on the panel today, I want to thank you for joining us, and be safe and have a great night. Thank you.